We need to determine the track length. To do that, we're just going to measure the staircase. We're just measuring from the top nose all the way down to the floor. This is called the A to B measurement, or the top nose to floor measurement. So that's your point of measure, just right at the top step nose. We also need to get the staircase angle. You can do that with a smartphone. In the iPhone, you just have the Measure app, which has a built-in angle finder. So you can just put that onto the baseboard. This one's 29 degrees. If you don't have a baseboard, you can also put it directly onto the tape measure and get the approximate angle that way. And in the installation manual, you have a chart on page 2.5, which tells you how much overhang you're going to need. Each straight stair lift needs a certain amount of track overhang to ensure that there's enough travel on the lift to get the footplate up to the top landing. So this one was 30 degrees, and you see on the chart here it runs from 25 to 55 degrees. So we're just going to look along the 30-degree line. Had it been 32 degrees, we'd just round up to the next one, so we'd round it up to 35. But in this case, we're right on the money, so we're going to use a 30-degree line. And you'll see we have two different measurements, one for height equals 0 and one for height equals 2 inches. What that means is, if you want the footplate just to come level with the landing, height equals 0, you'd use that measurement. If you want your footplate to travel further, so it's 2 inches above the upper landing, you'd use that measurement. And these are only guidelines. You can use somewhere in between. Me personally, I like to set the footplate up so it's about 1 inch above the landing in most cases. So I would typically split the difference on these measurements. So on the 30 degree, it goes from 6 5/8 for level to 10 5/8 for 2 inches above. So if I wanted my footplate to stop 1 inch above, I would just split the difference and probably go 8 5/8. Okay. Once you've determined your track overhang, you're going to add that to your A to B measurement, and that's your total track length. So then you can go ahead and make your cut. To cut the track, I recommend using a 12-inch chop saw with a metal cutting blade designed for non-ferrous metal. That's going to get you a nice clean cut. You always want to cut either the lower end or the upper end, not where the two tracks are going to join in the middle. Okay, so the first task is just to join the two rail sections together on the staircase. So for this we need the rail alignment blocks, we need a 3mm Allen key, a 4mm Allen key, and our gear rack sections. To join the rail sections together, we take the aligning blocks, they just slide into the lower channel. And you can just start by just pinching those up. And then you can take your top section and just slide that on there. It should just slide down until it locks into place. And then you can go ahead and tighten all the set screws up. Just make sure all the channels are aligned and you've got no gap. Now, that in itself wouldn't be very strong. That's just pinning the two rail sections together. Where this track gets its strength from, we have 5 1-meter sections of gear rack that slide into the channel. And once this gear rack is in place, this basically braces the joint. So once that's installed in there, then the rail can't open up or twist or as you screw it down. Okay, but we don't need this section on here. It's only a small staircase. So I'm going to take this one back off. So once you have your two rail sections together, we're going to install the gear rack. We have 4 1-meter sections of gear rack and then a 5th one which is slightly shorter, it's 0.8 meters long. So your gear rack section just slides into this channel. So your very lower one, you want to leave about a ½ inch gap just up to the end of the rail. And that's just to allow enough room for the end cap. Go ahead and tighten down the set screws, the bolts. We're going to use a ball end 4mm Allen key for this task. Just going to make it a little bit easier to get the bolts in place. Once you've snugged them up, you want to go down and then fully tighten each one. As you slide your next section in, you need to make sure that the distance between each rail section is timed correctly. So we supply you in the fitting kit a little timing piece of gear rack. So as you put the next section in, you're going to position that over the joint and then continue to tighten the bolts up, and that will create a perfect space between the teeth. As we only have 2 sections in this rail, it's advisable to leave your top section out, because this is going to make it easier to slide the carriage in place. So we're going to actually install this one later in the video. Okay, so in this section we're going to install the track hardware. So we have our charging cable that's going to feed down the centre of the track. We have our charging stations, our stair brackets and hardware, end cap, limit cam, and we need a 2mm Allen key, a 13mm wrench or socket, a Phillips screwdriver, and a heavy wrench to help feed down the cable in the track. Okay, so I'm going to start by feeding the cable inside the track. This is a 16-foot cable, and you'll see that the ends are slightly different. On this end we just have the positive and negative connections for the charging stations. On this end of the loom we have the same connections, but we also have an extra 2-pin connection. This one connects to the charger, which will go to the wall outlet. So wherever your wall outlet is, you need to make sure you feed this end to it. While the rail's still loose, I just tie a heavy wrench to the wire. Just makes it easier to get down there, and then you can just feed it. At this stage, if it gets hung up in there, you can just lift the track. It's going to help you get the wire down the rail. Okay. So the next task is actually to put the stair brackets on. So we supply you with 6 pairs of stair brackets with a standard installation. We only need 2 pairs here. And to install the stair brackets we have the T-bolts and the acorn nuts. So these just simply slide into a channel. And then when you get to the step you want, you just put the brackets on. The nuts on there. Same thing on the opposite side. And one thing to bear in mind, stair brackets utilise the same channel as the joint bar. So if you have got 2 rail sections, you're going to have to feed some of them from the bottom. So I'll do that here. Just angle the rail slightly and you can feed them in from the bottom. Once you've got the stair brackets positioned, you can go ahead and tighten them down. For spacing, on a full 8-foot section, we want 1 pair of brackets on the first step up, 1 pair of brackets just below where the rail is jointed, and then 1 spaced out in the middle. On the upper section, because you're typically going to be cutting that one down, you just use 2 pairs there. Unless you're using the full set, then it'll be the same setup as the lower section. So we already have our packaging down here, which is spacing the rail off the floor. We want about a 3/8 gap from the floor to the bottom of the rail. So the packaging works great for that. It's not a precise measurement. You know, I would say anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch will be fine. You just don't want it, that far off the floor where it's going to, raise the footplate height for the customer. Alternatively, you don't want it right up to the floor where you can't get your end cap on there. So that little bit of space just allows you to get that end cap in place and allows you to get it off for service reasons as well. So once you've got your track roughly in place, you can just go ahead, put some gentle pressure on the bracket and tighten it down. can use a socket for this task, you can put it on a drill if you need to. The nice thing about these brackets, they're basically self-leveling. You never have to use shims or spacers. If you're doing this on a carpet runner, for example, if you've got a carpet runner, this one would sit on the carpet, this one would slide down a little bit further and sit on the wood. It's basically self-leveling. Once you've got all your brackets in place, you can go ahead and lift the track up one step. It's going to make it easier to get your hardware in the lower section of the track. So firstly we have our charging stations. They're 14 inches long. And you can see they're positive and negative of red and black wires. The easy way to remember this, the black one always goes next to the gear rack, black rack. These just slide into this top channel. And a little care point here, you want to make sure that that wire doesn't get snagged up behind there as you slide that in. So it's going to pinch that wire as you slide it into the rail. So just make sure that wire is tucked in. Same with the positive. And there's a little 2mm set screw on the side that just pins that in place. Okay, and then you can go ahead and connect to your charging wire, red to red, black to black. And then we need to position the limit cam. This is the piece that tells the lift where to stop. Now this piece you do have to measure. So this just slides into a channel on the top. And we want to make sure this is 2 3/8 away from the end of the rail. So we're measuring from the back of the limit cam to the end of the rail, 2 3/8. And then you can go ahead and tighten that down. And then the last task is just put the end cap in place. You can tuck the excess wiring into the track. And this is a little bit of a care point as well. This is our end cap. Depending on where you're having the charge wire running out of the rail, there's a little access point for the charge wire here. So as you offer that up, if you line the bottom piece up first, you want to make sure that these wires run into these channels, so you don't pinch the wires as you put that end cap in place. And then there's a Phillips screw on either side to hold that in place. Okay, once you've done that, you can reposition your rail and we're ready to start building the unit.